My friends, thank you for taking time to join me today on the Pulse of America. My friends, the structure of American life is unrecognizable due to the fact of the allowance of cultures that clash with the experiment of democratic freedom. The attacks are harsh and brutish. Perhaps the recent college campuses protests of the Israeli war gives us an inside view of what really is taking place. The protests are for an organization that incited a war. Yet, please tell me how protesting on a college campus is going to reform the Middle East conflict. The real question to be asked is who is really behind the protests? Who wants to incite unrest and tear down our country? Is it that hard to grasp? There are actors behind it all. The warnings have always been in place and the same. When you allow the aggressive powers against the very country you live in to fester, to grow, under the guise of freedom, the outcome will be civil unrest and the destruction of values you cherish. Such is our condition today. The infiltration into the United States is organized and orchestrated. What you are witnessing with these protests is the power of social media and cell phone influence. There are also powers that be. The Kennedy assassination, the Chicago 7, Kent State made the point we no longer live in the time of Jefferson and Madison. The above mentioned made no difference. We live in a time of privilege and factions that govern. These protests will have no impact, but this generative thesis to overthrow or disrupt will be accomplished, which indeed it has. However, the powers that be will go on. If nations across the globe or even groups against American power can instigate, and if the powers that be in control or allow it, you can bet we are not too far away from national dictatorial control across the globe. Watch for it. People may be skeptical about this. Perhaps they do not want to consider a future dictatorial rule. Yet think about this. This is just me. It sure is amazing how there are protests about the Israeli war. Yet there are not, and have not been in my lifetime, protests against or about drugs in the schoolyard or on the street. No protests about programming that is destructive to America and its youth, just to name a few. You tell me, are there powers that be controlling the narrative of the country? Just of late and of surety, there was a tragedy in North Carolina where marshals were intending to issue a warrant, if ended in many losing their lives. But that is all we were told at the beginning. That was the narrative. It still is unclear what it was all about. But the point being, what transpired had to go through channels of approval before the story could be told. Following a few days later, there was the story of a shooter who was stopped from entering a middle school. They said the shooter was shot. That was the narrative. Nothing else. That is what is being reported. Nothing more. It has to go through channels for approval on what is to be said and presented. We live in a time of control. This has to be considered as well concerning the protests. We live in a time of deceit. We live in a time Orwell described. It may not be exactly as he described, but it is a time where we, in a sense, are free, but only as free as the powers that be intend. The thought police are enforced and unseen. What is being presented to the American public and what is being told has nothing to do with the citizen. It has everything to do with the powers that be. The upside of this is we are still living in a time of peace. We may complain about these factions of power, but we still are a nation that does not have war on its shores. Perhaps my insight is too bright or revelatory, but I have always said we still need to respect these powers. Why they are allowing the obstruction of attacks on the principles of a free society, I do not know. The seismic shifts in the construction of the Constitution and the checks and balances necessary for a free society are self-evident in to every citizen. The diminishing power of American citizens is dominated by all sorts of forces, from business to politics to religion to foreign policies. These have been so influential in security, safety, and the happiness of the American public that the side effects of the country's code of conduct has all but been eliminated. I think the greatest point of this fact is that there was a commission formed concerning an insurrection, and the powers that be decided unanimously to let an individual who was found at fault to freely roam the country, almost testing the idiocy of the American public by saying they were presenting the facts and presented the facts, and it was a fair and impartial spirit that animated them. This made it obvious the distribution of power is no longer representative of the citizens. There are greater powers making the decisions. The prolonged thought is the power between government and the people has been altered. It is not even keeled. I think this is substantial concerning the country we live in today. Substantial in what is taking place in our daily living. Substantial in the harassment of the intellect and mind of millions of Americans who still desire a country with common goals and common purposes. Respect and decency for the law. Quite the contrary, these one-time values that once graced America are most likely far-fetched, and they are a passing that will never return. Are the days ahead of us dangerous? They could be. I will say we should try to stay sound in our thinking and judgment. Hope the best for the future. The flip side of that coin is to be cautious because no one knows what tomorrow holds. One of the more hopeful signs is we still have the ability to communicate. Hopefully my criticism of these aesthetic matters are found worthy by the listener. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.